If you've ever wondered what 30 days of silence can do to a marriage, let me save you the suspense. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't heal. It doesn't even punish in the way it's meant to. What it does, if you're lucky, is give you clarity. My wife Ilara thought she was clever when she decided to stop speaking to me. No good morning, no arguments, no snide remarks about the way I set my coffee mug on the counter. Just silence. Her lips sealed like she was playing the lead role in a one-woman opera called The Cold Shoulder. Why? Because I dared to say out loud what had been gnawing at me for years. That maybe the garage, the one place in this house that once smelled like oil, wood shavings, and freedom, shouldn't be a mausoleum for her unfinished craft projects and seasonal decor. I wanted my tools back. I wanted my space back. And apparently that made me an enemy of the crown. Now Ilara has always been dramatic. She doesn't fight fair, she strategizes. Where most people argue, she withholds. Where most people talk it out, she shuts down. Her silence is her sword. And in the past, I'll admit, I bent under it. I apologized first, even when I had no idea what crime I was confessing to. But this time, something different happened. Her silence didn't break me. It unshackled me. This isn't just the story of a wife giving her husband the silent treatment. It's the story of how 30 days of her ignoring me reminded me of who I was before I became the man constantly apologizing for existing. Day 1. The first morning of silence felt almost comical. I came into the kitchen, said, "Morning," and Ilara didn't even flinch. Her eyes glued to her laptop, her nails tapping on the spacebar like she was typing out a restraining order against the sound of my voice. "How was your sleep?" I tried again, pouring coffee. Nothing, not even the twitch of recognition. She moved around me like I was a floor lamp, something present but irrelevant. That night, she plated herself a delicate salad with shaved almonds and ignored the chili I'd made. She ate across from me in total silence, except for the clink of her fork. The first rule of her game was clear: treat me as invisible, but visible enough to notice she was ignoring me. Day 2, I thought she'd cave. She didn't. She breezed past me with a smile reserved for her phone calls. Her friends got laughter. I got absence. The house felt like a museum, sterile, quiet, curated. I hated it until I realized something important. Without her voice, there were no complaints either. No passive-aggressive sighs about the dishes, no lectures about the proper way to stack towels. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was an opening. Day 3. Ilara came down the stairs in one of those silk blouses that made her look like she was perpetually en route to a gallery opening. She hovered in the doorway of the living room, waiting. I knew that look. She wanted me to break, to ask what was wrong, to beg her to speak. I sipped my coffee, turned the page of the paper, and didn't look up. A loud humph, then heels on hardwood, sharp as gunfire. Door slam. I smiled into my mug. Round 1, not mine, but not hers either. Day 4. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the garage. The one part of this house that had once been mine. Now it was suffocated with bins of seasonal wreaths and boxes labeled Ilara's projects, projects that had never seen daylight. Underneath it all sat my old Yamaha motorcycle, tarp-covered and forgotten like a tombstone. It was a metaphor I couldn't ignore anymore. My life, buried under her clutter. Day 5, I went in. The garage light buzzed to life. Dust motes swirled in the beam, and the smell hit me. Oil, rust, rubber. I pulled the tarp off the Yamaha, revealing a faded red frame, a cracked seat, and a chain that looked like it had been through a war. It was beautiful. I found my old socket set, wiped the grime off the torque wrench, and started clearing space. Every clang of metal on the workbench was defiance. Every sweep of the broom was an eviction notice to Ilara's empire of baskets and chalk pens. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed hard enough to rattle the drywall. I grinned. Music to my ears. Day 6. By morning, I'd made a list on the whiteboard. Carburetor rebuild, new chain brake, bleed spark plugs, battery replacement. It felt good to write a list that wasn't approved by her Pinterest aesthetic. That afternoon, I stripped the carburetor, hands black with grease, the radio buzzing low in the corner. When the engine finally coughed back to life after years of silence, I laughed out loud. A laugh that echoed off the walls of the garage and, I swear, cracked something deep inside me. Ilara appeared in the doorway, her arms folded. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She retreated like silence was still her crown. But I'd seen the crack. Day 7. We ate breakfast at the same counter, her with a kale smoothie, me with bacon and eggs. I left the pan in the sink. She glanced at it, jaw tight, but said nothing. Later that evening, while I bled the brakes and cleaned the chain, she hovered in the doorway again. Her eyes scanned the tools, the grease, the unapologetic mess. For the first time in a week, she spoke. "Roland," she said, "just my name." It sounded like a dropped glass. I looked up, grease smeared across my knuckles, and said nothing. Just stared until she turned away and left. And in that silence, I realized I wasn't invisible. I was untouchable. Day 8. The silence should have been heavy by now. Most men, I think, would have cracked, begging for conversation, throwing out desperate peace offerings, offering to repaint the kitchen just to get a word. Not me. On day 8, I made the garage mine, properly. I cleared every fake pumpkin, every dried flower arrangement, every box of seasonal inspiration Ilara had sworn she'd use someday. By the end, I had 3 neat piles: trash, donate, and get this garbage out of my life. I rolled the Yamaha to center stage, oiled the chain, and gave the machine what it deserved: attention. My hands reeked of grease and solvent. My shirt bore the kind of stains Ilara used to wrinkle her nose at. For the first time in years, I didn't care. She came down, heels clacking, stopped dead at the sight of me crouched over the bike with sockets spread around like treasure. Her eyes said, "This isn't what marriage is supposed to look like." My eyes said, "Then maybe marriage isn't what it's cracked up to be." She left without a word, but I caught her in the reflection of the garage window, phone pressed to her ear. Probably rehearsing her victim monologue for her sister. "Can you believe he's doing this just to spite me?" "Yes, Ilara. I can believe it." Day 9. Breakfast was war, disguised as routine. She set out her minimalist fruit and yogurt bowl, perfectly symmetrical, curated like it belonged in a lifestyle magazine. I dropped bacon on a plate and let the smell fill the air like incense to a different god. She stared at the bacon like it was blasphemy. Her silence today wasn't calm, it was strained. Every crunch of my fork against the plate made her shoulders twitch. I enjoyed every bite. Day 10. The house had always bent to her aesthetic. Sterile counters, empty spaces that looked clean but felt dead. Not anymore. I set up a proper coffee station, grinder, beans, French press, all of it proudly taking up counter space. She walked in, froze, and glared at the grinder like it was a stray dog, but she couldn't say a word, not without admitting her silent treatment was nothing but theater. Later, I left my vitamins out, my protein shaker too. 2 things she always banished to cabinets for ruining the vibe. I placed them dead center on the counter, next to her overpriced marble canisters that had never held anything useful. When she saw, her jaw clenched. Her hand hovered over the shaker like she wanted to fling it into the trash. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out. Scoreboard, Roland 2, Ilara 0. Day 11. I decided if the living room had been hers for years, it was time to reclaim it. I moved the couch to face the TV properly, put my feet on the coffee table, a simple, primal act, something she had always called trashy. I leaned back, turned on a basketball game, cracked a beer, and let the room smell like a man lived there. Ilara walked in, saw the rearranged furniture, and her mouth opened. She wanted to say something. God, she wanted to. Her lips trembled with all the unsaid complaints. Instead, she grabbed her bag and slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the picture frames. That slam? That was the sound of a kingdom falling. Day 12. The Yamaha coughed, sputtered, and finally roared to life. The sound filled the garage, raw and loud, drowning out the silence of the house. I revved it once just to hear the engine echo against the concrete. Upstairs, a door slammed. Footsteps pounded. Then Ilara appeared at the top of the stairs, face red, eyes flashing. "Jesus Christ, Roland!" she snapped. She froze. She had spoken, broken her own sacred vow of silence. Her eyes went wide. She covered her mouth like she could shove the words back in. I cut the engine and leaned against the bike. "Oh," I said, calm as steel. "So you can hear me?" "Interesting." Her cheeks flushed crimson. She spun, stomped back upstairs, and this time the slam of the bedroom door was less queenly, more desperate. Day 13. After her slip, she doubled down. Back to full silence, but now it was fragile, jagged. The cracks showed. At dinner, I cooked steak, medium rare, with garlic butter dripping off the edges. She stuck to her rabbit food. Every time the aroma wafted across the island, her nostrils flared. She chewed her spinach like it was my throat. I took a slow bite, let the juice run, and moaned just a little too loud. She dropped her fork with a clatter. Still no words, but her silence now was a leash burning her own hands. Day 14. The garage was fully mine. I built a shelf. I reorganized the tools. I spread wood shavings on the floor like confetti at a parade. She left a note on the counter. "The noise is disturbing the neighbors. No dear Roland, no signature. Just an accusation, sharp and cold." I read it, smiled, and tossed it straight into the trash. Then I went to the garage and ran the power tools longer than necessary, singing off key over the grind of the saw. If the neighbors minded, they'd knock. They didn't. The only one disturbed was Ilara, and that was the point. Day 15. 2 weeks in, I realized something terrifying. I hadn't felt this free in years. I woke up without dread. I brewed coffee without being policed. I worked in the garage, ate what I wanted, watched what I wanted. Ilara, meanwhile, was unraveling. She'd pace rooms, clench her fists, pick up her phone just to slam it down again. She was no longer the queen in control. She was a prisoner of her own tactic. That evening, I sat at the dinner table, grease still under my nails, and looked at her. "You know," I said softly, "this is the best 2 weeks of our marriage." Her eyes shot up, burning with words she refused to release, her lips pressed into a line so tight they could have cut glass. I smiled, raised my glass of beer, and toasted the silence. Day 16. By the 3rd week, the house had learned a new language. The soft sigh of a socket clicking home, the thrum of a charger, the scrape of a toolbox drawer closing with purpose. I came home, tossed my keys in the bowl, and for once, they didn't sound like an apology. I put a roast in the oven, salt, pepper, garlic, the holy trinity of men who don't need anyone's blessing, and went to the garage to give the Yamaha a small victory lap on the stand. A gentle roll of throttle, a hum that said, "Keep going." Through the door glass, I caught Ilara at the island, watching. Not angry this time, assessing. Like a queen deciding whether a rebellion qualifies as art. She drifted to the doorway and stood in that silk blouse that always looked like it came with a prenup. The engine idled between us. Her mouth quivered toward a word and retreated. "Smells good," I said. Not to her, just to the universe that finally allowed oxygen. She blinked, tightened her robe, and left. I cut the engine and discovered something odd. The quiet felt earned. Day 17. The kitchen had always been Ilara's kingdom. Counters bare, appliances hidden, everything arranged like the cover of a lifestyle magazine nobody actually reads. My coffee grinder, banished to a cabinet. My cutting board, only allowed out if it looked presentable. God forbid something useful lived on the counter, It might ruin the aesthetic. Not anymore. On day 17, I made the kitchen mine. I left the grinder proudly on display, hung pans on hooks where I could actually reach them, and pulled out a cutting board scarred with real use. Functional. Honest. Mine. Alara walked in, glass of sparkling water in hand, and stopped cold. Her eyes swept the room like a home inspector who'd just discovered mold. She stared at the grinder, at the hanging pans, at the board, then at me. Her silence screamed, "This is not a kitchen. This is vandalism." I ignored her and kept chopping onions. The smell filled the air. I tossed cumin and chili into the pan. Soon the place smelled like actual food, not citrus candles. She retreated to the fridge, assembled a sad little plate of greens, and sat across from me. When the curry hit the pan and the aroma rolled across the island, she cracked the kitchen window like she was letting out a toxic spill. I took a bite, closed my eyes, and said, "Perfect." Her fork clattered against the bowl. She didn't say a word, but her silence now wasn't power. It was pure frustration. Day 18. I took stock. Not of the marriage. That ledger had been cooked for years. I took stock of me, tools I actually owned, projects halfway done, the places in the house where my presence should be non-negotiable. I wrote on the whiteboard above the bench, "Finish brake bleed, done. Adjust clutch cable, done. Replace front sprocket. Saturday, clear out craft closet. Sunday, stop apologizing. Daily." In the bottom corner, I made a small box and wrote 31 inside it. No flourish. Just the truth waiting in numbers. Alara came out to throw something in the trash, saw the board, and paused at that square. Her eyes flicked up to me. I didn't move. Day 19. First start on pavement. I rolled the bike to the curb as the sun folded its knives, helmet on, gloves tight. I pressed the starter and the engine found itself like it had simply been napping for a decade. I took one lap around the block, slow and reverent. The wind reached in and loosened something knotted behind my ribs. At the second turn, a neighbor lifted 2 fingers off his steering wheel. I gave him the nod, the ancient suburban sacrament of we still recognize each other. When I pulled back into the driveway, Alara stood at the window with a glass of sparkling water and a face that could slice marble. I cut the engine and took off my helmet. She held my gaze for 3 beats, then turned away. I could almost hear the script. Dangerous, irresponsible, juvenile. Funny thing about silence, it renders the script useless. Without the sound, you have to stare at the motive. Day 20. Alara switched tactics. If she couldn't control the house with words, she'd curate it with friction. At noon, I found my coffee grinder unplugged. I plugged it in. At 3, my shaker bottle had migrated to a lower shelf. I put it back. At 5, someone had accidentally placed a decorative tray over the outlet my charger lived in. I lifted the tray like a magician, revealing a dove, and slid the plug behind it with the soft arrogance of someone rehanging an award. At 6, the doorbell rang. Pete from 2 houses down stood with 2 beers and a grin that said, "Saw you on the Yam. Nice work." We clinked bottles on the porch while the light turned orange and forgiving. He talked carbs and cables. I talked scars and timing. Inside, Alara passed the doorway thrice like a comet with opinions. When Pete left, I set the empty bottles in the recycling. Alara followed, lifted the lid, and watched them fall. "Relax," I said. I even rinsed them before tossing them in. Simple, factual, and just sharp enough to remind her that even my trash had more order than her silent war. Her jaw tightened, then loosened, then set. She left the room like she had somewhere better to be. There wasn't. Day 21. Sunday used to mean Alara setting the rhythm of the house. Laundry folded into perfect squares. Shirts pressed like they belonged in a store display. This time, I made it mine. I did my own laundry. Work pants, garage rags, shirts that still smelled like oil. I folded them on the couch while watching the game, volume at a normal level instead of her preferred quiet enough for a funeral. Alara came in carrying a stack of her perfectly ironed clothes and placed them in a laundry basket by the stairs. She didn't say anything, but the way she set them down, deliberate, slow, was a message. See, this is how it's supposed to look. I ignored the performance, muted the TV for a second, and said calmly, "Funny thing, Alara. 3 weeks of silence, and I haven't missed a single word." Her head snapped toward me, eyes sharp, lips pressed tight. She wanted to answer. I could see it fighting to get out, but she swallowed it, turned, and walked away. I unmuted the game, leaned back, and finished folding my shirts. For the first time in years, laundry felt like victory. Out of 22. By the 3rd week, I decided the house needed more than just my garage. It needed my presence everywhere. There was a spare room Alara had turned into storage, half-finished crafts, wreaths, bins of ribbons, unused picture frames, stuff she'd been hoarding for years. I pulled everything out and stacked it neatly in the hallway. Then I built a simple desk out of spare wood. Nothing fancy, just solid and functional. I put my laptop there, paid some bills, and realized I finally had an actual workspace in my own home. Alara walked past, stopped in the doorway, and froze. She looked at the empty shelves, at the desk, then at me. Her expression was tight, like she wanted to say, "This isn't your space. This isn't allowed." But her silence tied her own hands. She lingered for a few seconds, then turned and left without a word. For the first time in years, I felt like I had carved out a corner of the house that was truly mine. Day 23. That morning, I walked into the kitchen and found a vase of white lilies sitting in the center of the island. Alara's touch, of course. Her way of reminding me that this was still her kingdom. Pretty, sterile, perfect. I made coffee anyway, grinding the beans right next to her flowers. The grinder roared. She flinched but pretended not to. Then it happened. She slipped. "Roland," she said. Just my name. Her voice was sharp, clipped, like she hadn't used it in weeks. I turned and looked at her. "Yes?" I asked calmly. She froze, realizing she had broken her precious silent treatment. Her lips pressed together, her jaw tightened, and she spun on her heel, walking out of the kitchen without another word. I stared at the lilies. They were beautiful, but they didn't cover up the truth. Her game was falling apart. Day 24. By the 4th week, the silence had stopped being a punishment. It was background noise. Alara still floated around the house like an offended ghost, but the difference was, I didn't feel haunted anymore. I cooked, I worked in the garage, I rearranged what I wanted, and she had no power to stop me. Every day she watched me live without her control, and every day her silence looked less like discipline and more like desperation. Day 25. That evening, while I was sanding down a small project in the garage, I heard her voice through the open window. She was on the phone, pacing the kitchen. "It's been almost a month," she hissed, "and he's not even trying. He's actually happier. Can you believe that? I give him the silent treatment and he walks around here like he won the lottery." She paused, listening. Then her voice rose, sharper now. "No, you don't get it. He's in the garage all the time, cooking whatever he wants, rearranging the house like I don't even exist. It's like he's pretending I'm not here." Her tone cracked on the next words. "Of course it's bothering me. This was supposed to teach him a lesson. Instead, he's acting like he's better off without me." I put the sander down and just listened. That was the moment of clarity I didn't know I was waiting for. She hadn't been silent because she was hurt. She'd been silent because she wanted control. And the truth spilled right out of her own mouth. She had lost it. Day 26, I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. The kind of done that comes with peace, not shouting. At breakfast, she sat across from me, scrolling her phone like she had better company elsewhere. I ate my eggs, sipped my coffee, and studied her carefully. I realized I hadn't missed her voice. I hadn't missed her commentary, her rules, or her constant little corrections. And I asked myself a question. If 30 days without her words made me feel alive again, what would 30 years do? The answer was obvious. Day 27, I made the decision, quietly, no drama. I researched divorce attorneys on my lunch break. Found one with good reviews, tough, no nonsense, exactly the opposite of Alara's manipulative theatrics. I booked an appointment. That night, I sat in the garage with the Yamaha humming softly beside me and thought, this isn't the end of something. It's the start. Day 28. The attorney listened as I explained everything. The silent treatment, the years of criticism, the erosion of who I was. She didn't look surprised. I got the sense she'd heard this story 100 times before, just with different names. It sounds, she said, like you've already made your decision. I have, I told her. I just need to make it official. She walked me through the paperwork. Since we had no kids and mostly separate finances, it was clean and simple. She prepared the documents while I waited. When do you want to serve these? She asked. Day 31, I said. The perfect ending to her experiment. Day 29. Back home, Alara moved through the house with that smug energy of someone preparing to win. I could feel it. She thought tomorrow she'd finally speak, deliver some grand performance, and I'd melt with gratitude for her attention again. I almost laughed watching her rehearse it in her head. I spent the evening in the garage one last time before everything changed. Worked on a small box, sanded it smooth, finished it with care. Not for her, for me. Proof that my hands could still create something honest. Day 30. The last day of silence. I kept my routine like always. Coffee, garage, dinner of my choice, TV with my feet up. She watched me more than usual, circling like a hawk, waiting for me to break. But I didn't. I never would. That night, I went to bed early, ring still on my finger but already heavier than it had ever felt. Tomorrow, it wouldn't be there. Day 31. I woke up calm, not nervous, not uncertain, just done. Alara came downstairs, dressed neatly, clearly bracing for her big reveal. Maybe she thought she'd say something like, "Now you see how it feels without me," expecting me to crawl back. Instead, she found the kitchen table. On it lay my wedding ring and a folded note. She froze. Her hand shook slightly as she picked it up and unfolded it. The note was short. 30 days of silence showed me the truth. I'm happier without your voice than I ever was with it. I'm done. Don't wait up. She gasped, finally breaking character. Roland, what the hell is this? I stood in the doorway with my bag, calm, certain. It's exactly what it looks like, I said. Her face twisted, rage fighting with panic. You can't just throw away a marriage because I didn't talk to you for a month? I smiled faintly. No, Alara. I'm walking away because that month was the best we've ever had, and that tells me everything. I picked up my keys and headed out. Behind me, she shouted something. I didn't care enough to listen. The garage door opened, sunlight spilling across the Yamaha. I swung a leg over, started the engine, and let it roar. For the first time in years, I wasn't riding away from her. I was riding back to myself. 90 days after the papers were signed, the house was finally mine. Clean break, no shared assets to fight over, no kids in the middle. Just me, my bike, and a silence that finally meant peace. The first weeks after I left, Alara tried everything. She sent long emails full of, "You misunderstood me." Then came the late-night calls, the sudden apologies, the promises that she'd support my hobbies this time. After that, anger. Messages about how I was selfish, how I'd ruined her life, how I'd never find someone like her again. By the time the divorce was finalized, the messages slowed. Friends told me she was still spinning her story, claiming I'd abandoned her for a motorcycle, or that I was going through a midlife crisis. The irony? She was the one spiraling. She moved into a sleek downtown apartment, filled it with the same sterile decor she loved, and posted carefully staged photos online. But behind the glass, people said she looked thinner, sharper, like the silence she once weaponized had turned inward. Alara always needed an audience, someone to absorb her moods and her power plays. Without me, she had no stage. And that's the thing about people who live on control. When there's no one left to control, they start collapsing under their own weight. As for me, I reclaimed my life. The first thing I did was drag every piece of her curated nonsense out to the curb. The empty vases, the inspirational wall art, the decorative baskets that had never held a damn thing. Gone. The living room smells like leather and motor oil now, not eucalyptus candles. The garage is no longer a graveyard. It's a workshop, alive every night with the hum of tools and the smell of cut wood. My Yamaha sits center stage, polished and running like it's got another lifetime in it. Beside it, a new workbench I built myself, scarred and honest. I don't hide the mess. The mess is proof of life. The kitchen finally looks like a place where someone actually eats. My coffee grinder sits proudly on the counter, plugged in, never banished. There's a proper station for cooking, and every evening I make what I want. Steak, chili, curry, whatever the hell I feel like. Nobody wrinkles their nose or cracks a window to chase away the smell. At night I sit in the living room, TV on, feet up on the table, tools still scattered from the day's project. No one lectures me, no one polices me. The silence is still here, but it's mine now. Not her weapon, my peace. Sometimes people ask if I miss being married. The honest answer is no. I don't miss explaining myself, I don't miss defending every decision, and I sure as hell don't miss being treated like a guest in my own home. I didn't just survive Ilara's 30 days of silence. I built a life out of it. And every time I turn the key in the Yamaha and hear the engine roar, I remember the sound that saved me. Not her voice, not her silence, but my own freedom. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.